I don't know if you all brought your copies of The Power Broker with you, but please do read along with me. There are only 50 chapters. We'll begin on page 1. The working lifespan of the element force that was Robert Moses defied comparison with the working lifespan of other men. Robert Moses had been in power shaping Long Island in 1924. He was in power tirelessly shaping not only Long Island, but the great city stretching out toward it in 1934, and in 1944, and 1954, and 1964, until 1968. Other men hold real power, shaping power, executive authority for 4, 8, 12 years. Robert Moses held shaping power over New York metropolitan region for 44 years. Was the tirelessly work that he compared to in the duration comparable to a natural force? So was the result of that work, the sum total of the accomplishment of the things that he got done. As natural forces shaped the city and the suburbs east of the Hudson, the 2,100 square mile region on which 1974 dwelt more than 12 million human beings, as did he changed the course of rivers, filling in the beds of the Harlem and the Bronx, and cutting new channels for them, shoving one side of the mighty St. Lawrence, making new curves in the swift Niagara. He filled in the city's frayed edges, transforming into solid earth Great Kills on Staten Island, the Flushing Meadows in Queens, a dozen other vast marshes. Nature gave the region one shoreline, he gave it another, closing inlets in the barrier breaches, cutting new inlets, reshaping miles of beach dunes. For mile after mile, the earth and rock that constitute the shoreline of Brooklyn and Queens and of Manhattan's Hudson Shore are his. The cement and steel that hold them in place are his. The grass and shrubs and trees that adorn them are his, as are the concrete and steel of the marinas, the shorelines, the overlooks, the parking fields, the bicycle paths, the runways, the airport terminals, and of course, the shoreline parkways. Not nature, but he put them there. His bridges bound together Long Island and the mainland of the continent, torn apart by glaciers eons before. His causeways reunited the island with its barrier beach. He hacked out lagoons, filled lakes, made beaches, welded islands together. At Inwood Hill, he cut through the primeval forest substantially unaltered by the hand of man since the dawn of time. He altered the region's skyline, leveling great areas of low and regular tenement foothills and replacing them with slim, tall spires of 200 and 300 feet high, civic and culture edifices, great groves of apartment houses. By the close of the age of Moses, for example, the skyline along much of the eastern shore of Manhattan Island, that was the heart of Metropolis, a skyline that was, to a great extent, Governor Smith houses, LaGuardia houses, Corlear Hook houses, Baruch houses, Lillian Wald houses, Jacob Riz houses, Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper Village, Bellevue Hospital, NYU Bellevue Medical Center, the United Nations, Rockefeller Institute, New York Hospital, East River houses, Woodrow Wilson houses, Senator Robert F. Wagner Sr. houses, Abraham Lincoln houses, Riverton houses, North Harlem houses, Harlem River houses, Colonial Park houses. Well, you get the idea. For miles and miles at a time, a Robert Moses creation. Do forces of nature, volcanoes, earthquakes, avalanches, destroy whole towns and villages, forcing populations to flee? What force destroyed Sunset Park, the Syrian Quarter near the Battery, or a dozen other neighborhoods as big as towns? Robert Moses believed his works would make his name immortal, and he may well have been right. And not just because some of them were named after him. The roads of Rome stood for 2,000 years or more. Who would predict less of the roads of Moses? Who would predict less for his Shea Stadium? A structure consciously shaped to resemble Rome's Colosseum because he was afraid that his convention center office tower, called the Colosseum, didn't make the comparison clear enough. As for the parks he created, fly over New York in the year 1999 and the 2,000 acres of Brookhaven Park and the 4,000 acres of Conquet on Long Island and the 21,000 other acres of park that Robert Moses wrested away from the developer's bulldozer to ensure that the people of New York would always have green space and still be green, a tribute to his foresight. For how long will the great bridges that he built, the Verrazano, the Triborough, the Whitestone, the Throgs Neck, the Henry Hudson, the Cross Bay, the Marine endure? Life of a suspension bridge, engineers tell us, is measureless. Atomic attack or natural catastrophe could render all New York shapeless. Barring such monumental calamity in centuries to come, discerning historians will, if they look for it, be able to see writ plain through the great city and the suburbs evidence of the shaping hand of Robert Moses. Other great builders left their mark on physical New York, but the achievement of even the greatest, a Zeckendorf or a Helmsley or a Winston or a Lafrac, or the Rockefellers of Rockefeller Center, is dwarfed by the achievement of Robert Moses. Not even the greatest of the public officials who, while not builders themselves, shaped the growth of the city, the almost forgotten father of New York, Andrew H. Green, and the greatest mayor New York has ever had, Fiorello H. LaGuardia, had a fraction of Moses' influence on the shape of New York. The shapers closest to him in total influence are probably the robber barons, who built the railroads into the city and throughout its suburbs, and who erected monuments to themselves in great skyscrapers and terminals. But the influence of any one of them is dwarfed by his. To compare the works of Robert Moses to the works of man, one has to compare them not to the works of individual men, but to the combined total work of the era, the yardstick by which his public housing and Title I feats can be best measured, for example, is the age of skyscrapers, which reared up the greatest mass of stone and steel and concrete over Manhattan in quantity comparable to his. The yardstick by which the influence of his highways can best be gauged is by the age of railroads. But Robert Moses did not build only housing projects and highways. Robert Moses built parks and playgrounds and beaches and parking lots and cultural centers and the civic centers and the United Nations building and Shea Stadium and the Coliseum. And he also swept away neighborhoods to clear way for Lincoln Center and the mid-city campuses of 4 separate universities. He was a shaper not of the sections of a city, but of a city. He was, for the greatest city in the Western world, the city shaper, the only city shaper. In sheer physical impact on New York and the entire New York metropolitan region, he is comparable not to the works of any man or group or even a generations of man. In the shaping of New York, Robert Moses was comparable only to some elemental force of nature. But if in the shaping of New York, Robert Moses was an elemental force, he was also a blind force, blind and deaf to reason, to argument, to new ideas, to any ideas except his own. He made himself blind. He possessed vision in a measure possessed by very few men, but he wouldn't use it. The arrogance which had been his characteristic from youth, the arrogance which was most striking characteristically of his mother and grandmother, the arrogance that had led his relatives to call him Bela Moses' son. The arrogance that had gorged on power, swelling with each increase, had now that his power in his chosen fields of activity was so absolute, become absolute itself. No rules, not even the most innocuous, could apply to him. As he was above the rules, he was above the law. He had always felt himself above it, ignored its spirit whenever possible. But now there was a new depth to this feeling, a new intensity to the particular manifestation of arrogance. Confronted in building up the base for the Idlewild Airport by the same problem by which he had confronted the building of the base for Jones Beach, the sand that he imported blew away because it was not anchored, as it was in Long Island's natural dunes, by the horizontal growing roots of beach grass. Moses, without bothering to obtain anyone's permission, dispatched teams to obtain the grass from public beaches owned by Suffolk County and from beaches of the summer homes owned by private families. W. Kingsland Macy, yes, that Macy, an ardent conservative who knew the value of beach grass and what would happen to the dunes if they suddenly denuded of it, was enraged by this when he learned that scores of Long Island State Park Commission employees, out on their hands and knees, illegally yanking out the beach sands and that Macy wanted to preserve in perpetuity for the people of his county. He ordered County Attorney Edgar Hazelton, who ordered Moses to desist on pain of arrest and imprisonment of any commission employee caught, and on Moses himself. Now, Moses' reply was not long in coming. The next weekend, when the Hazeltons arrived at their summer home in West Hampton, they discovered Moses' men yanking out the grass on their beach. The practice was finally ended when Macy ordered local police to arrest 13 of Moses' grass pullers. The measure of his arrogance was taken by a dictator. Rafael Leonidas Trujillo Molina was considering commissioning Moses to propose public works for his Dominican Republic. When, after one long afternoon of discussion with Moses, he abruptly told him that he has decided not to hire him after all. According to Moses, the dictator told him, "You'd want my job." Thank you.